Welcome, friends. It is 5 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. People will be joining us as we begin. So welcome to the Equity Series. This program is hosted by Humboldt County Office of Education and the Humboldt Del North Equity Partnership. And we just want to welcome you to the March series. Thank you. Next slide, please. Before we begin this evening with our learning session, we want to do a land acknowledgement. We gather virtually this evening for the Equity Summit series, and we acknowledge that the land that many of us are situated on is unceded territory of the Wiyot peoples. The names and places of the Wiyot language are based on a relationship to the land and the waterways in the region that pre-contact were traveled by canoe. You might be zooming in tonight from a location near Baduat, Weechi, or Wiyot, which are all names related to the bodies of water. As well as being the Aboriginal territory of the Wiyot, this region of Northern California is also the traditional, ancestral, and present homeland to several indigenous nations, including Hupa, Karuk, Matol, Tolowa, Wailaki, and Yurok peoples. Today we come with respect to the tribes who have been here for millennia and model how to live in sustainable relationship with the land. We take this opportunity to consider the action steps we can take in addition to acknowledging the land. Mo, if you could add the links into the, you're on it, sister, thank you. So we encourage people to always attach action to land acknowledgements. So we share the link for honortax.org, which is a way to contribute money to the Wiyot people. Also, you can look up where you are. If you're not here in Humboldt County, you can use the app in our chat here, nativeland.ca, which will help you find whose land you are on, where you are located. And one thing that came up recently, it's fine to be on this slide. One thing that came up recently, I was asked by someone, is it disrespectful to give a small amount of money, to donate a small amount of money? And it is not. Any amount that you contribute is a gift. So if you donate $1, $5, that's a lovely thing to do. Okay, so tonight,
you got a labor acknowledgement.
Thank you. That's why there's two of us, friend. I also want to add a labor acknowledgement. We recognize and acknowledge the labor upon which our country, state, and institutions are built. Remember that our country is built on the labor of enslaved people who were kidnapped and brought to the United States from the African continent, and recognize the continued contribution of their survivors. We acknowledge all immigrant labor, including voluntary and trafficked people who continue to serve within our labor force. Thank you, Mo. So this evening, Mo Harper-Desir from Art and Equity. Do you want to introduce yourself, friend?
Sure.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mo Harper-Desir. I'm a local arts creator, activist, and educator. I am a co-founder of Black Humboldt, which is a local Black-led organization working to create safe spaces for Black and Brown community members. And I also work at Access Humboldt, which is our local access station, as the director of admin and development. And I also do a bunch of anti-racist and equity-led arts-based workshops virtually and in the county with a number of organizations. So thanks for inviting me to share this session.
And I'm Sharon Blank. I am part of the Humboldt Del Norte Equity Partnership, the first cohort that went through. And I also work at HCOE in Special Beginnings. I'm an early interventionist. So I work with little ones under 3 with special needs, specifically autism or speech and language impairment. And I'm also the president of the Eureka NAACP. And I'm pleased to be with you this evening and to be working with Mo this evening. Next slide, please. So the equity series this year has a completely different format every month. Different parts of the community are highlighting particular needs of different parts of our community. This evening, we're looking at the very diverse, rich Black community here in Humboldt. And April 29th, Queering the Future in Education. Queer Humboldt is going to be facilitating that discussion, folks from Queer Humboldt. And then May 27th, we're going to be having a culminating event for the Equity Summit, and more information will be coming about that event in the future. And tonight, our topic is more than just February, co-sensing the reality of our Black students. Mo, do you want to go from here?
Yeah. So hello again, everyone. We chose this name as a call to seeing and providing for our Black and Brown students, teachers, and the community on more than just Black History Month, or the few weeks leading up to Black History Month. So that's why we chose to do more than just February. And we also don't want to just focus on the pain and struggle of the Black community and our Black students, but also the greatness that they bring to everything and their boundless capabilities that they have in and outside of the classroom. So just to reiterate, this is not another racism 411 informational session. We want to engage in Black conversations with Black community leaders and teachers and individuals so that we as a whole can imagine the futures of all these Black identities, right? And how we continue to support them in ways that ignites their passions, recognizes their humanities, and they aren't always categorized as a month out of a year, or the pain and struggles of our ancestors, right? So we got the co-sensing the reality of our Black students from a book. It's called The Essentials of Theory U, Core Principles and Applications. It's by C. Otto Schwarmer. I think I said that right. And it states in it that co-sensing is seeing reality from the edges of a system and then establishing the horizontal connection. So in other words, being able to see the system of barriers and harm that our Black and Brown students face, as well as our teachers, and then being able to recognize and retaliate from a personal approach. So we can see this in practice in the ways that we make space for marginalized students, or how Black and Brown teachers are able to locate race-based needs, whereas white teachers may not. The goal is for non-Black teachers and administrators and community members to understand that gap and then be able to equip themselves with the tools necessary to provide support. So we thought this was a good topic to bring up because it's something that Black and Brown educators are already doing because they live similar traumas and similar stories as their Black and Brown students, whereas non-Black or Brown or BIPOC educators and individuals might be experiencing that gap, right? And not thinking that this is an area that needs support. So the reading continues to explain that we're looking for the act of holding space for awareness-based change and getting out of your bubble. So as individuals, we have many bubbles, and we interact with those bubbles every day, right? We have social media bubbles. We have institutional bubbles like work. We have infinity-based bubbles, which means people that have the same identifiers as me end up in my bubble. So that could be race, age, sex, gender, lots of things. And these bubbles keep us in the same loops doing the same things. And if these bubbles aren't exposed to Black life, culture, and struggle, then most likely you're missing that information to spot where it shows up in your students' lives. Yes, chat, representation is a huge part of being exposed to other bubbles. So co-sensing at its core is about immersing yourself in new contexts that matter to your situation and that are unfamiliar to you. Perception is not passive. It is something you need to interact with your whole body, activating all of your senses. And through that activation of all your senses, you're reshaping the system of issues. You are revising the set of your core and the things you question. You're getting new insights into opportunities and then relating them to outside opportunities. You're creating personal connections to opportunities and experiences. A core term that they use in the reading is switched on, to meaning, you're co-sensing. And an ability to map systematic barriers that may not be directly affecting you. And then an improved capacity for building generative stakeholding relationships, right? So connecting with students in new ways that prepare them for what they need from other educators for the rest of their lives. Thank you, Deanna. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So a big chunk of the way we start to understand our Black and Brown students, faculty, teachers, community members is to understand that a lot of the barriers that we've experienced is institutionalized through white supremacy culture and white supremacy, right? And it's been something that's affecting our lives since slavery. And people love to bring up that slavery was a long time ago. But a lot of these institutionalized barriers have been in place since then, and thus affecting, the generations that came after us. So this is a video. It basically uses a foot race as a setting to explain the many institutionalized ways that we have held Black and Brown bodies back since slavery. And you're going to see words that are kind of popping up in the video. And I really encourage folks that if you do not recognize a word that pops up, please Google it, please research it, please read more articles. This is maybe a 5-minute video. And because this is not a racism 411 session, we're not doing more than 5 minutes, but I still encourage you to check out what it's talking about, because there's going to be titles, and these are methods and systems put into place that are often discredited as not real or not affecting people the way that they do. And the outcomes are very real for Black and Brown bodies. So write some stuff down if you see some new phrases, and we can press play. Make sure you're sharing your sound.
So next we're going to talk about safe spaces and exclusive spaces. The term safe spaces refers to places created for individuals who feel marginalized to come together to communicate regarding their experiences with marginalization. Safe spaces are important. They attempt to create places for marginalized groups. These places serve two purposes. They provide spaces for groups to recuperate, reconvene, and create new strategies and vocabularies for resistance. Also, safe spaces are important because the presence of these places makes visible collective and individual traumas, which disrupt neoliberal narratives of self-reliance. To make these safe spaces, to create them, you make room for people to show up as they are. To be vulnerable and allow yourself to build an emotional connection with other people, to be inclusive, give others a space to talk, know that your actions speak louder than your words do. And if there's a physical environment, it's important to make it welcoming. And just one of these safe spaces can be enough for a person. Do you want to add anything to this, Mo?
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Safe spaces take many forms, and a safe space that might be for me may not be for someone else that shares similar identifiers as me. And a lot of the time you'll see we already have safe exclusive spaces in our community. You know, we have women's clubs, we have men's clubs, we have LGBTQ clubs. We even have like children's play groups. Like these are all what we could consider a safe space. Sometimes people think it's drastic when you make exclusive race-based groups, as it reminds them of segregation, and they forget that we often participate in exclusive spaces for our identifiers.
Next slide, please. So locally, some safe spaces are created through Black Humboldt. There's also Be Black, which goes by Building Black Community. There's Youth Artists Will Succeed, HC Black Music and Arts Association. There's BMEN, the Black Male Empowerment Network. There's the African American Center for Academic Excellence at HSU. And these two at the end have asterisks because I wanted to make sure to talk about them a little bit more. The All Humboldt Black Student Union is for members of the Black Student Union. Although all the presidents identify as Black, some of the members do not. And most of the advisors are not. Most of the advisors identify as white. So although that space is specifically for Black Student Union, Black BSU members, it is not an exclusively Black space. And the NAACP, although our focus is on supporting individual Black members of the community as well as groups, it also is a mixed group. And if you've gone to any of our meetings, most of our meetings, the folks that show up are white, and there's a smaller number of Black folks there. We have made a shift to intentionally amplify the voices of Black people within that space so that we are inviting Black folks to speak first and add their voice and comments and thoughts first in those spaces. So this kind of ties into what Mo was talking about. Some Black folks feel comfortable enough in those spaces at the Eureka NAACP, and some Black folks do not. They feel that it's too much of a white space. So having a variety of spaces is very important so that people can find a place or multiple places that they feel that they can be themselves and find community.
All right, I think we can go to the next slide. I'm actually gonna ask, someone in the chat brought up a good point that says, during segregation, Black and brown folks were harmed and it was a time of violence. When we create infinity spaces or safe spaces, we are centering our healing. So I'm actually gonna ask Stacy if you'll stop sharing your screen. And if everyone who is not a panelist would turn their camera off, we're gonna create a virtual stage so that we can see who's talking. I won't turn my camera off yet. Then when your camera's off, I want you to click on the 3 dots that are in your box and click to hide non-video participants. And I think I saw
Miko's here.
Yeah, I saw Miko. Our panelists are Roger Koltz, Miko Ross, Cedric Aaron, and Deanna. Deanna, you have to pronounce your last name for us, please. Maybe Miko left and, oh no, I see him. Either way, this now we'll just be able to see who's talking when, and give folks a spotlight instead of hunting through all the participants. So Roger, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself before we start doing questions.
Sure, thank you, Mo. First of all, thank you all for being here, especially the people I know, and some of you I call friends, and it's great to see you all. My name is Roger Koltz, no D though in the Roger. That makes a difference, right? I am a middle school teacher in McKinleyville. I've been there for 20 years about now. And before I taught there, I taught 3 years in a site in Central East Oakland.
All right, Miko, you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Miko Ross. I am a long resident of Humboldt County, transplant from Chicago, Illinois. I have a various background that I wouldn't waste your time to list. But I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad this space is available for us to share. And looking forward to some productive outcomes.
I guess I'm next, right?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I am Deanna Fletcher Louisville, and I am many things. I am an arts educator, theater lecturer at HSU. I'm a regional coach for Turnaround Arts in South Bay School District, and I have also spent time down in Hoopa with Klamath Trinity Valley Schools in Orleans, Hoopa, and Trinity. I also am a performing artist, so I'm a dancer, theater maker, and I am currently studying instructional design and technology. So I'm very much into making sure that we're re-envisioning, reimagining, recreating our curriculum design with diversity, equity, inclusion, and our underrepresented students in mind.
Thank you, Deanna. So this next question is for each of you, whoever would like to respond first. What are some stresses of being a minority educator in predominantly white spaces?
I'll jump into that one. For me, it's dealing with the ignorance of non-Black people. I mean, I have plenty of stories. Sometimes they're coworkers, talking to them about my life and my situation, often I get that look like I'm going a pair of horns or something, because they just can't relate to what I'm telling them because our lives are so different. Or sometimes I get the, well, I was poor too, like that's all that Black means in that sense. And so what I've, and then, I end up feeling alone on campus, right? I end up feeling like I don't really have supportive people that I need to have my back, especially when we get into some situation in a classroom. Just recently with the January 6th, events, whatever you want to label them, right? I wanted to bring that to my class, look at that situation, as far as the facts. And then I wanted to pivot and see, hey, folks, what do we think? Would it be the same if those people doing that action were dark skinned? The point being, right, because we had MLK Day coming up and I wanted to look at some of his work and kind of see how close we were to living the dream, right, that he talks about in his speech. And, a right-wing student got very excited and wanted to argue with me and all Black Lives Matter people, kill cops and burn cars and everything else. And, got a little sideways. And afterwards, I'm talking to my white coworkers and one of them was like, well, I went to a Black Lives Matter rally. And it was like, well, why didn't you put that out there? You know what I mean? And so, instead of getting some support from that person, that would have helped that white student understand that not everybody that, is their, like her generalization she's making it out to be. It just was me by myself, right? Dealing with this situation. I've had other events as well where, during a Civil War simulation, I asked the white teacher who was running the simulation, what happens if a Black student is put on the South and doesn't want to be there? Well, they just have to deal with that. You know what I mean? Like you don't understand, like you wouldn't make a Jewish kid play a Nazi, would you? You know what I mean? So those kinds of things, right? And, and you just walk away, like, at least for me, like, okay, I don't really feel like I'm a part of this campus like I want to be, Yeah, we're congenial and we're professional, but they're not seeing me for who I am. So then I realized, like, how are they going to see my students, right? The students of color, so then I feel like I'm the only advocate those kids have, certainly. But yeah, but I think that's enough for now. So, anybody else want to get that one?
That's a loaded question. I don't think that any of us could answer that all in one go, but we're trying. Roger tried to get as much in there as possible. And I know Miko's thinking about what angle should I see it. Some stresses of being a minority educator in white spaces, predominantly white spaces, and specifically in Humboldt is representation. Because there's no representation, there's nobody that looks like you. You most likely won't be supported, feel supported. You go into spaces where there are nuances, behaviors, and language that is culturally inappropriate. You have to address those things. The cultural taxation that one takes the onus to mentor, model, be the therapist, the counselor, the auntie, for the Black and brown students, to be the usher of the new Black and brown body coming into that space, one of the things that I did early on coming into the K-12 system here is get a Black therapist that I've been seeing teletherapy for about 2.5 years now. And that's very helpful. Having to talk about the Black nuances, why, like, I don't want to have to explain these things. When I speak to my Black therapist, they automatically know what I'm talking about. I don't have to do a whole backstory and cultural story. While therapy is really important and our healthcare system encourages us to have therapy, I don't necessarily use it because I need it as a person, as a human. I use it because I need it as a Black woman. I need to talk about all of these Black issues that I'm having in white spaces. Or is it white issues that I'm having as a Black woman in white spaces? Let me put it that way. So I'm just gonna pass that over to Miko, because I think those are probably some of my main stressors, and how I handle it. I handle it a lot in therapy with my Black therapist, and knowing my capacity of how much I can push against the buck, because I want to still be able to be in operable condition the next workday, because I don't have a choice. I have to be Black and go in. I don't have the privilege to not work. So I have to balance this this mental, spiritual health game with showing up, and knowing that I'm not only showing up for myself, but I'm showing up for the other underrepresented Black and brown bodies. And that's stressful.
Yeah, right on, sister. I am, wow, this is just the first question. Wow. And I almost want to pass and just tap out on the first one. One being that my perspective on that question wouldn't be from an educator's point of view, because I haven't had the chance to have that position. Well, I've stayed away from being an educator in this particular environment deliberately, for all those reasons that you and Roger talked about. I wasn't ready. My background let me know that I wasn't ready. How I came up, I was typically the only Black person in a school coming up. So I got it from the other end, which gave me some clear indicators that the particular systems of education wasn't even about us. It totally excluded us. And all through college, it was very clear to me that the education system doesn't have a space for us. And it was a very lonely, lonely place from third grade on. And I felt I didn't have the gumption or the support that I felt I needed to really fight that fight that long. And now here I am in a different position, because my wife is an educator in this system. She is white with a Black husband and a Black child. So vicariously, I'm in that position anyway, because she's a tough cookie, but there are some things that she by her being with me, she had to learn certain things about being with a Black person and about living a Black life. Because to tell you the truth, this is a little sidestepping from that, but it's important. Before we got married, we had a long talk about, did she realize what she was taking on and what baggage she was picking up by partnering with me? Her life would change within her world. The view, the way people see her would change. And then we had that talk again when we decided to have a child. Because, all right, now you're taking it to a whole nother level, and you're going to find out what you're really all about, because you're going to be tested. So in some respects, I was coaching in that realm, in that kind of respect, as to what to expect. How are you going to handle it? Let's try some scenarios. Let's figure this out before we get there, because I've already crossed that bridge that you're going to see. And you're going to need to know, do you have what it takes to make it across? So, oh man, this first question. I'm really going to save myself some room, because I got a feeling the other questions are going to be, if this is the first one, I'll save room. But yeah, the educational system, I only have pure love for those of you who are within it and trying to teach and educate and still maintain your sanity, because it's vicious. It's vicious. It's a subtle viciousness that attacks you in many different directions. It really does. And it's so subtle and it's constant. And it's just, I just commend you. At anything I can do to support and help, even if it's just conversation and kicking it in the spirit, I'm here because I understand. And I'll tell you all something. Please stay in, because I need it. They need you. I was alone. I didn't even have Black teachers. In many instances, I was alone. Our children need you there. They need to see those faces there. So congratulations, big ups, and you do have support in these places. And thanks for this space.
I just want to say one thing, Miko, because you said that you're not an educator, but in our culture, culturally speaking, an educator doesn't mean you hold the title, and you have been an educator for me. So I just want to do a little like calling in that you are an educator, and that's why we have you in this space, because you have taught us a lot as a community. And so hopefully our HCOE community can also pick that up, that teaching is not because you hold the certificate, but because we carry each other as a village.
Well, true that. Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's something I do value. Thank you. Much love.
Thank you, Miko. Cedric, would you like to introduce yourself, friend, and then I'll ask you the big question that Miko just responded to. The big first question.
Yeah, again, I apologize, and just for the panelists in the space, it's kind of a cultural joke, you know what I mean? Sorry if I'm on CP time, you know what I'm saying? But I was also working. As you saw in the chat, I was facilitating a CSU-wide awesome workshop. So again, my name is Cedric Aaron, and gosh, y'all, I wear a lot of hats up here in Humboldt County. So I don't know how to explain myself, but yeah, I work at HSU as a professional helper. I'm a father of 3 daughters. I'm a husband. I'm a trustee for Northern Humboldt High School District. That happened in November. Thank you for y'all who voted for me, and much love for folks who didn't. It's all love the same. Yeah, like, kind of like I was joking around with Miko in the chat, but all serious, you know what I mean? I'm a community uncle, you know what I'm saying? I there's so many kids that just know me, and I love them on my own, you know what I mean? I'm tough on them, but it really comes with love, and that's just kind of how, in our Black community, it's like, that's how it was, you know what I'm saying? Neighbors, like, they had the green light to stay on kids, you know what I mean? That's just what it was. So, again, thank you for letting me be in the space. And Sharrone, I'm ready for the question.
Okay, friend. What are some stressors of being a minority educator in predominantly white spaces?
Oof.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's it's one of those things where it's this system, this current education system, was not made by us from jump. You know what I'm saying? So as a Black educator, you know what I mean? It's uncomfortable at times, just because, we're always in this this race of like, we got to follow the rules and norms that this system that was not created by us, that we have to follow. But we also want to connect with our students who gravitate towards us, and doing things that, again, not to get us fired, you know what I mean, or get a lawsuit, you know what I'm saying, but doing things that are part of the hidden curriculum, so to speak, you know what I'm saying. So I feel like as an educator of color, just consistently trying to like walk that dance and make sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's, you know what I mean, and also too, sometimes it's challenging to kind of, Dee, you mentioned earlier of not calling out folks, but calling in folk and dealing with folks who are more on the fragile side, you know what I mean? And you're just calling them in, but then it's like you get hurt feelings and, well, I didn't mean it this way, that whole intention versus impact. And then you get it flipped on, and then like, say me as a Black educator, it's like, well, why am I feeling bad? I didn't do anything wrong. I just called somebody in, but they flipped it on me and I feel bad, or I'm feeling some type of way. And then that breaks down the relationship of working with our colleagues. And it's like, well, shoot, every time I try to say something, they got something to say, you know what I mean? Or they the ones where they just, they gossiping in the lunchroom or the break room, or they're writing some cryptic post about me on Facebook or Instagram. And then folks start to isolate, and I know there's not a lot of Black educators here in Humboldt County, but I would love to see more, you know what I mean? And but it's those little things I was mentioning that could make it challenging for a Black educator to stay or want to stay and go to a community where there's a lot more folks who look like them or embrace that cultural piece of education.
I want to add a little piece, switching hats a little bit, because I'm an educator too. I work in early intervention. So I work with biddies with special needs and with their families. And I think one of the things that I bump into as a Black woman in early intervention, which is also a very white space for educators, is when I do have a Black student, the way the families respond to me. They're very, very thankful. They're like, thank goodness my boy or my girl, it's like, has a Black woman in class, has a Black teacher in class. There's just this opening up that just happens naturally. And one of the things that I notice, which is in the data, if you look at the data, is just how our little ones are seen and how their behavior is interpreted. You can see it from day one if from people who are not Black folks looking at Black children. It is different, the way their behavior is interpreted is different. And, Miko, it's like what you're saying, it's really subtle. It's like, I can't like document what the difference is, but I can feel it and I can see it, how they're seen by other educators who are not Black. So, it is really important for us to be in all spaces in education for all of our children. The next question for all of you, what are some ways you found to support your Black and brown students and coworkers? And you all, whoever wants to respond first, just step forward and go.
I'll jump in there on that one. The way I find it easiest for me to support students, educators, I am brutally honest. My filter is kind of dull. I hit straight to the jugular when people come to me and say, oh, I'm having this sort of problem, or I really don't understand this. What's it really all about? And like I said, my wife being white and in this school system, of course, her colleagues are all white as well. And most of them are pretty young, so they're coming into it with open eyes and full of ambition. And fortunately, a lot of her friends and colleagues are really open, and they really want to be, aware and do a really good job of being fair. I find that most of them are coming in, really in a good place. And I'd hate for them to get jaded by what's already there, and turn sour. So when we have conversations, in our own time, when we have conversations and things come up, I just go straight to it. I go straight to the point, and sometimes my wife will elbow me and tell me, hey man, really? And I'm like, what? She's elbowing me a lot less now. As she's getting further down the rabbit hole, she's definitely elbowing me a lot less. But my way of support is the truth. And that's all I got. I don't know how to soften the blow or make it, make nice of uncomfortable situations. It's already uncomfortable. That's why you're talking. That's why you're having this issue. That's why you bring it up. It's already uncomfortable. So me trying to make nice of an uncomfortable situation doesn't seem to make sense. My grandfather had a term. He had several, but this one definitely fit the bill. And he said, why put sugar on top of shit? So living from that, out of that kit, I support with the truth, and I support with hard truths. I tell people, especially white people, oh, well, you come to a Black person, you must want to hear a Black experience. You must want to hear it from a Black perspective. Here you go. And some walk off with like, well, maybe I shouldn't have asked him. And then others walk off with a very clear understanding from a person, fortunately, I feel that they trust. So by these people feeling that they trust what I have to say, I say it. And I give it to them 100% Black. And most of them walk off very appreciative. But one thing they can't say is they didn't know once they talked to me. They can't walk away and say, well, I didn't know, to the next person. Yeah, you did, because I told you so. So, and when it comes to the youth, anytime youth need support, anytime the youth need to hear something, I'll bring it from way back on up to now. Unfettered, no holds barred, and I can talk to them freely. And then because they're like dry sponges in the ocean, they soak it up. And the one thing I like about the youth is they have really good feelings. They know when something feels right. They know when it feels like the truth, and they really respect the truth, and they soak it up. What they do with it, hey, it might take a while for them to understand some things, but wasn't that the way for us all? But I try and put the tools in their toolbox, because one day they're going to reach in there, they're going to need that screwdriver, and they're going to have it. So that's the way I support the students and some of the teachers that I know.
I can go next. One of the ways that I support Black and Brown coworkers is I make myself available. Many people probably know I do not like to give out my phone number, but if you're Black and Brown, I'm like, call me, hit me up, because there's something to be said about being Black and Brown and Humboldt and feeling alone and being the only one in that space, or one of two people, or the other person on the other side of campus, so you don't really get to see them anyway. I make myself available. I check on people. I co-founded Black Humboldt as a space for exclusivity, when you want to just be around people who look like you, who have similar upbringing, who just understand intrinsically. There's no explanation that really needs to be said. So I support through community spaces. Students are also welcome in that space. One of the things that I love to do pre-COVID especially is make myself also physically present and available to people. I make sure I say hello. when I see Black and brown students and I walk on campus, and many of the schools that I've been throughout, Eureka, Soham, Hoopa Valley, and Arcata, is when they see me, they're like, and I know that feeling because I was that kid. And you know, teachers are like, pay attention, stay in line, come back in the class, do this, do that, do that. And, you know, I have to sort of soften the teacher's perspective in that moment. You have to seize the moment and say, wait a minute, we're having a moment. And we have to allow for this moment to happen, and it's totally okay. The child's not being defiant. The child is not being disruptive or choosing to not learn. The learning is also happening with our experience together. It might not be the lesson plan or the core content, but there's learning happening by you being able to model that magic that's happening between Black and brown bodies, and what community looks like. And I think that's very important. So in those moments, there's one child that I particularly love to see when I'm at Pine Hill. She's like, you look like my mom. You look like my mom. And I'm like, oh, I do? Oh my gosh, it's so sweet. And so wait, let me just put a pin in this. You know, this is not like when the cops say that Black man looked like the other Black man. What the kid is saying is that you're a reflection of my mother. And so in that moment, I was like, oh, you know what? Because we're family. We're family. We might not be blood, but we're family. You can call me auntie. And so whenever I see her at Pine Hill, she's like, hey, auntie. And so now it's less of a mystery to my presence for her. She's like, I know that lady, that's my auntie. And now I see her at functions like at NAACP or at WINCO. And she's like, hey, auntie, Ma, that's my auntie. And so I finally met her mom. And so that's how we start to build community, that it doesn't just happen in classroom community, classroom culture, but that how are we teaching bigger real world experiences within the school system? And so that's one of the ways that I support students through my presence and seizing that moment to say, hey, I know that they're supposed to be lining up, but let us have this moment. And I think another way that I support is through my work that I'm actually here for through Turnaround Arts. We believe that a quality education includes arts education, which also includes being diverse, equitable, and inclusive. So if you're, that's a loaded statement there, but like, if you're truly giving quality education, it's not just driving the content, it's not just standardized tests like you saw in that video, but how are you building culture and community, diversity, equity, inclusion, partnering with the arts? Doesn't mean you have to be doing arts integration, but using the arts as a driving vehicle tool for your content. And so what I do as a coach is I try to expose and call all that's missing, because as Cedric, Roger, and Miko said, this education system wasn't built with us in mind. So you're already learning from the margins because you're marginalized, right? So my job is to make sure I'm calling all of that in, like, this is missing, blind spot, this is missing. And if I don't do that, I'm being a bystander, and bystanders do harm. So yeah, I think that those are my three to-goes: my community gatherings, being sharing magic with Black and brown students. I mean, I just want to talk about one more other moment. There was I was coaching a teacher at one, I forget which Eureka City school. But there was a Hmong student who didn't expect for me to play Hmong music, but was also like fascinated by seeing a non-white teacher teach. And the student was like, I know this song. I know this song. My someone in the family plays this song, and was so shocked that I would play, that I played this song. And so how are we making sure that we center Black and brown students? And I know this particular panel is about Black students, but I just want to make sure that I'm sending this message here that white students will always in this country, in the United States, always have the opportunity to speak first, be seen first, be heard first. So we're not saying push them aside. We're saying center the voices of those who don't always have the privilege to have that opportunity. It takes a special moment for Black and brown children to have to be first. It shouldn't be special, it should be normal. And right now it's not normal. And so until we get to this place of it being normal, it'll feel like we're pushing white students aside, but that's not it. Even poor white students, I have poor white friends who have had opportunities who are like, I don't understand, D, we come from the same community. Because you're white. That's all that. And they're like, yeah, you're right. It is because I'm white. When I get in there, I'm going to speak up for you. Like that. I digress. So hopefully you took something from that.
Yeah, I'll jump in. And I first want to second Dee's emotion, like Smokey would say, as far as, it's just mentoring other people, right? In that sense, especially the younger, educators of color that I work with. We just hired like literally the second Black teacher I've ever seen in McKinleyville Middle School, and I'm the first and only, and so he and I talk a lot, right, about our experiences. And, it's very interesting because every so often a white colleague might even see us talking, and then we get that weird look like we're, all of a sudden the Muslim Antifa, because we're just talking about Black things and being Black, like in their space kind of thing. But certainly that is one big thing, is just mentoring other people and connecting them, right, with the resources in our community. Like, hey, do you know Dee and what she's doing Black Humboldt? Do you know about this group? Do you know about that group? Just so they understand there is a community here that they maybe haven't accessed yet, right? In that sense. And that's the same for like our custodian is from Mexico, and he and I have these conversations all the time as well, again, right? So not just, the Black people, right? Anybody that's not Caucasian kind of thing, right? Or doesn't identify as that, and in terms of the students, I mean, first of all, it's just being there for them, especially when they're going through something. I've had multiple kids over the years in McKinleyville get called nigger up and down, left and right. And I'm going to the administration like, hey, what are you gonna do about this? At some point, the boy's gonna lose it and punch somebody, right? And then he's gonna get sent home. Like, how is this, how is that not violent what they're doing to this boy? Because we'll get that, right? He was violent, like, but using words to destroy a spirit isn't violent. Like, how come that isn't being dealt with, as effectively as him throwing one punch kind of thing? So certainly that part of it, bringing these issues into classrooms, as much as you can in a way that's appropriate, right? And makes sense in the curriculum. So that way the kids see you dealing with this on their behalf, right? And talking about these things. For instance, like Thanksgiving, we talked about Thanksgiving myths. Because again, folks, we have a lot of Native people in my classroom. Like, they're not looking at Thanksgiving like the other people are, right? In that sense. And, doing that consistently, not just doing, the flavor of the month, right? As far as that goes, they begin to see you as that ally, right? That big brother, like that uncle, that auntie that's going to have their back no matter what. I just had a student conference with a Native person in my class this year, and his mom flat out was like, yep, we're lucky, we feel good that he has you as a teacher. And it was basically, yeah, we're just glad he has a non-white teacher. Because you're bringing things to him that no one else has ever brought to him in his class, and and your perspective on things is helping him, understand that it won't always be the way it's been for the first 7 years of his education, right? And there are people out there that are looking from his perspective at things, and they often don't get that, right? Because like Miko said, you might be the only Black person in your school. I was usually the only Black person in my class, one of 2 or 3 in the school, often, sometimes a little more, but definitely, right, feeling alone. Let's talk about slavery. Everyone's head turns to me like I'm supposed to speak for, the Black race and what was done to Black people for hundreds of years, kind of situation. So certainly that as well, just making these kinds of conversations a part of our daily, or not daily, but what I'm saying, a normal part of what we do in our classroom. And not just again in terms of color, right? Looking at LGBTQ issues, looking at gender issues, looking at all these different things. So people in my class understand that being made the other and then being treated differently because of that is not okay, right? It's just not, you know. And then lastly, I think especially for me, you know, in terms of like supporting kids and everything else, is making myself accessible to the white kids so they can learn, right? In that sense, right? Because how else do they get past their ignorance unless they get some time with some dark-skinned people, you know? And so, and I've certainly had that situation. For a while, we had a black student union at my school, and like more than half of the kids were not black, and they were just coming just to learn about black people, you know, flat out, you know. And that's what I told them, that's what we're gonna do, you know. So if you like hanging out with me and want to have, you know, fun day and learn about black folks, like, yep. And like, cool, this is awesome. Like, I love the fact that there's so many not black people in this club just trying to learn about black people because they know they're ignorant, right? You know, you know, it's not like, you know, they totally understand. And so some of them want to actually not be ignorant, you know what I mean? And so how does, you know, I have to make myself available in that sense, in my opinion, to help them learn. Because otherwise they're just going to grow up with the same silly concepts and then go and inflict their pain on somebody else, right? And I got to clean up that mess after the fact. I'd rather be proactive and help them not be the jerks, you know, pardon my language, but, you know, not be that person later on in life. But certainly all of that stuff drains you, right? In that sense, you know. And so that's where, back to the first one, having that community of people that I can tap into, right? And, you know, and support them when they're in that place I'm at every once in a while where it's just too much and you wanted to walk away and call it good. And, you know, so it's kind of those three things. Like I said, you know, helping mentor the young people and creating that community for the educators, to being there for those black kids, white, you know, brown kids, you know, but beyond that, just helping them understand that the idea of being made the other is just not okay, you know, for any reason, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm going to help make that not happen in my class or to you if I can avoid it. And then lastly, like I said, you know, not purposely, hey, white kid, come here and talk to me, but, you know, taking those moments when I have a chance to like help that person get past their ignorance and you know, being that bridge, so to speak, right? So that's kind of my take on those, to not take too much time. Because yeah, like Miko said, we could all, these questions, we could all be here for a long time answering these questions.
Did everyone who wanted to speak have a chance? Yep, looks like it. Okay. You know, this next question, I think some of you partially answered it, but I want to give you an opportunity to add a little bit more if you'd like to. We're going to take this part of our learning session to about 6:20, and then we're going to switch over. The final question is, why do you still do this work even with all the hardships? So why do you still do this work even with all the hardships?
I'm afraid of the alternative, right? The alternative is unacceptable. You know, leaving things as I find them, just not okay. You know, thinking about my own life and the things I've gone through, thinking about what some of my students tell me they go through, you know, it's just unacceptable. I mean, folks, when I first came to McKinleyville, folks, I had some white students tell me, I don't know if you guys remember this, but like 20 years ago, there was a black man who rode his horse through town, you know, without batting an eye. Hey, Mr. Copes, do you know Nigger Will? And I'm like, what? Like, where did I move? You know what I mean? Like seriously, that's what you call people out in the open. Like, that's crazy, you know? And I've heard some other things, you know, over the years and seen things. And so, yeah, I can't, you know, knowing what I know, I can't just be done. You know what I mean? It's not good enough yet. So that's kind of my why.
Oh, go ahead, Cedric.
No, yeah, you know, I'm laughing because for folks who know me really well, you know, the panelists specifically and other folk, they just like, Cedric, do you sleep? Like, do you do self-care? Like you're always talking about it. Like, do you practice what you preach, brother? Because you are always doing something, you know? And the large reason why I do what I do as an educator and being a stakeholder with you fellow educators and our kids is that process, you know, of paying it forward. You know what I mean? I think maybe some of y'all I might have shared this, you know, who are in the space, but you would have not liked me as your student back in the day, because I was, boy, oh boy, you couldn't tell me nothing. You could not tell me that. I was extremely defiant. And if you weren't gonna validate me, or if I wasn't gonna be heard, it was just shut down, and I'm wilding, you know what I mean? But one of my teachers saw past that, and she made time and space to get to know me. And she knew I was smart. I could do the school thing, you know what I mean? So she used a form of motivational interviewing for me to identify my strengths. So when I'm making my goals, I can look at, well, how is my behavior gonna help me meet my goal, or stray from that? You know what I'm saying? So and I appreciate her. I mean, like literally a teacher probably saved my life. You know what I mean? I probably would be somewhere different if it wasn't for a teacher in our public education system. So I just have this idea of just paying it forward. You know what I mean? There could be another student out there who is struggling and does not have that consistent, healthy support system. And I could be that one person, you know, whether I'm getting paid for it, you know what I'm saying, through my work, or just, again, just being that, you know, that community uncle now, you know what I mean, and talk to them about what they like to do, you know, whether it's sports, arts, music. Anime is a big deal, you know what I mean? I don't know much about anime, but, you know, I get excited for them, you know what I mean? And then they see that and it's love, you know what I mean? Yeah, I just want better for our future. You know, these young children, they're going to be the ones taking care of all of us, you know what I'm saying? So if we get them to a level where they're holistically healed, you know what I mean? You know, they're going to take care of us, you know what I mean? And they're going to take care of each other and their families, and then they're going to continue to pay that forward, you know? So just that process of paying it forward, that keeps me doing the work, even though there's times where it's like, whew. And then D, like you said, and then that's when I'm hitting y'all up in my contacts, like, whew, y'all. They don't pay us enough for this, but we here.
I'm like, when is the system gonna start paying for my therapy? Because Medi-Cal don't cover that. I wanna point to a couple of things. The question was like, what pushes you to do this work? And I just want to throw out a couple of things that might not actually tie points, but hopefully you pick up what I'm putting down. Educational and psychological theory doesn't really work unless all representation was included in those case studies. And we keep using theory from way back when on our Black and brown students. That doesn't work. Trash that. Like, can we find a new way of working in this system? While those things are valuable and required for you to counsel, to do therapy, to teach, I just say, how do we dismantle and disrupt some of these colonial practices, which includes our educational and psychological theoretical framework? So I'm gonna just put that on the shelf. You do what you want with that. And as far as, like, you know, people are like, oh, like, what is the reality of our Black students? How are we co-sensing? Heidi, I'm gonna read that in a second because I know you're about to give us something. I want to read what that says. But how are we co-sensing the reality of our Black students? We're like, oh, times are different. Things are changed. It's not the same anymore. Actually, it is very much the same as when my great-greats, as an American descendant of enslaved people, it is very much the same. Not much has changed. So I'm going to tell you a very vulnerable story. Moira, you've heard this story. Shout out to you. I know you hear Moira. When I left New York, coming from this colorful world, everyone calls New York the melting pot. My mom had put me in a performing arts school, 6th through 12th grade in Delaware, Biden State. Shout out to Delaware. My mom's here. Shout out to my mom. And in that school, when I got to 8th grade, I was a theater major. You had to declare a major. And in my favorite major, my theater teacher called me a nigger. And so my world went from this beautiful New York, colorful place to like black and white. It just went black and white. I was like, oh my gosh, I thought that was history. I thought that as a kid, I'm like, oh, that's the past. We're not dealing with that anymore. That's back then. So when that happened, I was like, I had to, and you know what? Like, the school put me in the school systems therapy. I had to muddle through all the way through college, how to heal from that experience. Y'all, you know what the teacher did? She took me out to dinner to try to apologize. And I don't know, bribe me. I don't know what the dinner was, because I told my mom like years later, like, hey, yeah, you know, that teacher took me out to dinner after that moment. She did get fired, but it was a hard thing. And so we might think, you know, even white teachers in this space right now will be like, oh, I never do that. I don't know if she was acting out of emotion. I don't know if she was truly a racist. I don't know what happened. But, you know, teachers are like, oh no, our staff isn't racist. Our school wouldn't do that. You don't know that. There are teachers in our education system in Humboldt who have very racist families, and they know that. And they're trying to figure out how to address their very racist families. And we can sit here and pretend like we're not going to co-sense the reality of our Black students and what they have to deal with the racist families that exist in Humboldt, or we can actually address it. So from then on, the next 2 years later, then I would have a teacher in my very same major, different teacher, who saw me teaching some sort of technique to some classmates in my theater major in class. And the teacher called me out in the middle of like group work. It wasn't like a class, a whole group class lecture. The teacher says, Deanna, don't teach. It doesn't pay well. I didn't know what to do with that. Still working on that. But there are things that like teachers say to our Black students that puts us in this world of questioning your existence as a Black student, questioning your participation. Like, how are we really being cognizant of the way we're teaching, interacting, sharing with our students? How are you being vulnerable and sharing with your students that you don't know everything, that you are learning, that you can unlearn some of the things that you learned? Fast forward, I come to Blue Lake to study at Del Arte, and I'm like, what in the Twilight Zone? Cedric, you know I tell a story all the time. I'm like, what in the Twilight Zone did I end up? Because I didn't see not near one daggone Black person. So, and when I say Black person, I'm talking about American Black students, because international Black students, that's another conversation, because Americans love themselves some international quota students, okay? So that's all different. And I am a first generation Nigerian, and so I have that duality of understanding the two. It's very different. We can talk about that if you're listening and you want to know more. That's not this conversation. US Black students have a very different experience. And my motivation, to answer your question, Sharon, I went on a tangent. What pushes me is very personal. How do I help fill in the gaps? How do I help usher students to navigate this system? How do I look forward and reach forward to my mentors and reach back and pour the same things that have been poured into me? How do I be a vessel? So when I was at Del Arte, I found myself as an adult learning student needing my community, needing to surround myself around people. And I can pinpoint every single Black person, including the people on this panel now, of when I met them, when I sat down with them, how much that filled me, how much it was important for me to keep going through Del Arte. And that's a blind spot in many institutions, how much Black people need other Black people. And whatever support that means, educationally, spiritually, physically, mentally. I got through Del Arte because of all these people on this screen right here, and there's some missing, but I want to pour back into that same experience, that even though I'm not from Humboldt, I know you don't have to be from Humboldt to understand what Black students are going through. It's very visible, it's very transparent. So when I'm like, why don't white teachers get it? Sometimes I'm like, I don't know what else to say. How much research and reading, you can do all the reading you want. You can do all the white nice you want. But how are you truly disrupting colonial practices here in Humboldt? And that's my question. I'm gonna leave you all with an inquiry question. How do you disrupt colonial practices by not just doing all the reading and watching of documentaries, and applying and learning how to disrupt our system, and not just using educational and theoretical practices that don't include Black and brown bodies? Those case studies and research has to explicitly say this case study was conducted with Black students, for you to say that it works, and not to say that the student is not working with the thing. The student is doing what they do to live life as a human being. I digress because I know we out of time.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Miko. Thank you, Cedric and Roger. Mo, are you good with me moving forward, friend?
Yeah, I actually just want to read what Heidi wrote before we move on.
Sure.
So Heidi is the superintendent.
Superintendent.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so she continues to do this work because of the impact. As a person of color, she has had students and families / guardians of color and white children, even when not known. I had the chance to reacquaint with a student from 25 years ago today who was doing construction work for my district. And he shared that after the death of his best friend in the Trinity River drowning, that her support of him made a difference. And she's really lucky to hear that, because most teachers don't hear about their impact. And then I also want to add, just as an educator, I don't work in a school right now, but I worked in a school fresh out of college for 8 years, middle school and high school. And it was difficult, but I did it because at a young age, I think second grade, I got into a school of choice, and it was an all-white school. But I lived in an inner city that was mainly Caribbean, Black and brown identities. And there's so many things I experienced in that space that I didn't understand as a child, that when I grew up and started teaching, I knew I needed to create Black normalcy in white spaces. Like, I was cast as a slave in a play I did not audition for. I was constantly asked questions about my hair texture, why I have beads, why I eat stinky food at lunchtime. My father's from Haiti. I was raised with a stepfather from Jamaica. We ate, I guess, ethnic food, but just things that I thought were so normal were seen as so strange in predominantly white institution, that when I started teaching, I was like, I want to be the teacher that normalizes Blackness. I was working at a school in Arcata, and a little boy got some fresh cornrows. He was feeling himself. And the kids on the playground, I saw them kind of asking him questions. So I made sure to tell him that he looked fly. And I could tell that moment, he was like, yes, okay, like, I do look fly. Like he was questioning himself, even though he walked into that building beaming with his like fresh new hairdo and was caught with kids being like, that's not normal, but it is normal for us. So I had to remind him of that normalcy, and seeing his reaction, reinforces this work for me as well.
Thank you, Mo. So we made lots of space for this because this is the best stuff. This is the best stuff. People talking about their experiences, collectively, all of us sharing our experiences as educators in this county. This is the best stuff. So in the next 5 minutes, we're going to shift a little bit. I want to thank Deanna and Cedric and Miko and Roger and Mo.
ASL round of applause. I think maybe we'll skip we had a bunch of slides with information on them that we're also going to email to everyone here. So maybe we'll skip those slides. We have a list. Oh, can you go back one, Stacy? This was a list of like Black and Brown educators or folks that are in educational buildings. Like not all these people are traditionally teaching classrooms, but we want to give them their flowers because a lot of the things that got brought up in our panel today are universal for educators in our area. And if you see someone not on this list, go ahead and write them in the chat. We don't want you to run to these people and ask for the answers to your problems or how to fix the situations going on in your schools, but we want to just give them their flowers and appreciate them because we recognize that it's hard to be a teacher. It's hard to work in predominantly white spaces. It's hard to support students. And then these folks have to do all of that at the same time. Yes, thank you, folks in the chats. This was me and Sharrone just kind of like thinking off the top of our heads. Oh yes, Keith, Flamer. Yeah, so keep that going in the chat. And then can we go to the next slide? And then these are some Black-led organizations and initiatives in our community. These can be places you can find safe spaces, events, conversations. Like the African American Center, they just did a whole series of really powerful Black speakers for Black Liberation Month. They were community-wide. So, all these organizations do something different for the Black community. Some of them offer learning opportunities for the white community. So we went ahead and listed them. If you want to support and you're not sure how to support the Black community, giving to organizations that, serve the Black community is a great place to start. Sharrone, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's really important for the non-Black educators in this space to learn about these different spaces so that you can bring them up and make sure your students know about them and can connect them to these resources in the community that have these safe spaces. Next slide, please.
So we're actually going to skip the next two, I think, and we'll just include we have an email ready to go out to participants here. We basically are giving you tools to start anti-racism learning, as well as specifically how you can support Black students and learn more about anti-Blackness that occurs in our systems. So you'll get that. It's a list of things you can watch, listen, read, and then for our other educators that are here joining us, things you can implement into your curriculum and into your teaching techniques. So will you go to the next? Yes, thank you. And then this is a list of workshops or organizations that host workshops that dance around equity, anti-racism, exploring whiteness and white supremacy culture, Lots of options. This will be in the email as well, but I wanted to draw attention to this because reading books is great. Self-educating is great, but sometimes it really does take getting into a workshop or doing something hands-on to really start co-sensing, right? You need to feel what I'm feeling to create, real change or understand the levels of it.
Mo, can I repeat that for you? Mo just said you need to create, co-sense, feel what Black bodies are feeling to go through that work. And I just want to add, the Whiteness Within workshop is specifically tailored to the arts. So if you want to feel that through a creative mode, if Mo, can you just go back one so they can just see that one? The Whiteness Within workshops through open art is an arts-based practice. So if you want a creative mode of learning through this, that's a great opportunity to, it's the only one I believe on there that uses the creative arts to do that learning. So I just wanted to point that out, that's really important, especially since I'm big on the arts.
Embodiment is a part of co-sensing. So Heidi recommended that we all bring our cameras back so we can have a visual connection before we close the space. There is an evaluation. I'm going to put the link in the chat. We would love feedback. There is talking and posting. There is the Foundations of Implicit Bias and the 4 Dimensions of Racism, a series that will be in April. You can go to the, I believe, Stacy, please chime in if I'm wrong, but you can find out more about that.
I will email registration information.
Perfect. And that's about it. So the eval is there. I'm going to go through this chat and add it to our list. That will also go out in the email. And then I think, there's one more slide that if you want to get in contact with any of us about more similar things like this.
May I also throw something out there? I'm doing beta testing on a phone. You'd have to have your phone to do this, but I'm doing beta testing on a course that I am creating around whiteness and working with Black students. So if you're interested, I'm going to drop my email in the chat if you'd like to participate in that. The course is a daily course that can happen over 7 days or 14 days. So it just requires a little bit of your time every day on your phone. It's via texting. You subscribe to it with whatever phone number you want. And I like to see how that works out. If you're interested, please email me beta testing on a white learning course. Thanks.
I want to thank all of you for coming. Please continue to come to these sessions. I think this has been amazing this year, how it has been centering students' experiences and people of color this year. And next year or next month, it's going to be fantastic. Queer Humboldt is going to be facilitating the space. So continue to sign up. Oh, and if you go to HCOE, all of the previous sessions are there. The recordings are there, the resource lists are there. It's a huge resource for people. So please make use of it and let other people know it's available. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm going to say thank you again to our panelists for being vulnerable and sharing their truth and being willing to speak on topics that are touchy and sometimes hard to talk about. I'm also thankful that people like you are in our school systems and willing to talk about these things. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mo. Thank you. Good night, all.